The morning sun was just starting to warm up the busy sidewalk when Alex carried his guitar case down the street. He had been doing this every weekend for the past 6 months, and today felt different somehow. Maybe it was the perfect weather, or maybe it was because he had practiced a new song all week that he was excited to share with the world. Alex was 16 years old, with calloused fingers that told the story of countless hours spent playing guitar. His sneakers were a bit worn out and his jeans had seen better days, but when he held his guitar, none of that mattered. Music was his escape, his passion, and lately, it had become his responsibility too. He found his usual spot outside Sunrise Cafe, a cozy little place where people loved to sit outside and watch the world go by. The owner, Mrs. Chen, had always been kind to him. She never asked him to move along like some other shop owners did. Sometimes she would even bring him a free cup of hot chocolate when the weather was cold. Alex opened his guitar case and carefully took out his acoustic guitar. It wasn't fancy or expensive, but it was his most treasured possession. The guitar had belonged to his grandfather, who had taught him how to play when he was just 8 years old. His grandfather had passed away 2 years ago, but every time Alex held this guitar, he felt like his grandfather was right there with him. The guitar had a beautiful warm brown color, and although it had a few small scratches here and there, it produced the most amazing sound. Alex ran his fingers gently across the strings, checking if it was still in tune from the night before. The familiar sound made him smile. He was ready. He placed the open guitar case in front of him on the sidewalk, with a small handwritten sign that read, "Thank you for listening." Alex never liked to ask for money directly, but the few dollars and coins that people dropped in his case helped his family more than anyone knew. Alex's mom worked 2 jobs just to keep their small apartment and put food on the table. His dad had left when Alex was 12, and since then, money had always been tight. Alex had wanted to get a part-time job to help out, but his mom insisted that he focus on school and his music. She believed in his talent and always told him that music would take him places someday. The morning crowd was just starting to pick up. Alex positioned himself comfortably on the small folding stool he always brought with him. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a moment, and began to play. The first song was one of his favorites, a gentle melody that seemed to make people slow down as they walked by. His fingers moved naturally across the frets, and his voice, though still young, carried emotion that touched people's hearts. Within minutes, a small crowd began to gather. There was Mrs. Rodriguez, who worked at the flower shop next door. She always stopped to listen for a few minutes before opening her store. Today she smiled and nodded approvingly as Alex played. A young couple holding hands paused to listen, swaying gently to the music. The woman whispered something to her boyfriend and they both smiled. Alex loved these moments. When he played music, he felt connected to everyone around him. It didn't matter if they were strangers or if they came from different backgrounds. Music was a language that everyone understood. As the morning went on, more people stopped to listen. A businessman in a suit who usually rushed by without looking up from his phone actually paused today. He stood there for almost an entire song before dropping a $5 bill in the case and giving Alex a thumbs up. An elderly man with a walking cane sat down on a nearby bench. Alex could see that the man's eyes were closed and he was listening intently. After a few songs, the man approached Alex. "Young man," he said with a kind voice, "you remind me of myself when I was your age. I used to play guitar too, though I was never as good as you are." Alex stopped playing and looked up. "Thank you so much, sir. That means a lot to me. Keep playing, son. The world needs more music like this." The old man placed a $10 bill in the case and patted Alex on the shoulder before walking away. By noon, Alex had earned more money than usual. The guitar case had several bills and coins, and more importantly, he had shared his music with dozens of people. Some had requested songs, others had just listened and smiled. A few people had even recorded short videos on their phones, which always made Alex a little nervous but also proud. A group of teenagers from his school had walked by earlier. While some of them had stopped to listen and seemed genuinely impressed, others had made jokes about him playing on the street. Alex tried not to let it bother him. He knew that not everyone would understand why he did this, but that was okay. The lunch crowd was different from the morning people. They seemed more rushed, more focused on getting their food and getting back to work. But Alex didn't let that discourage him. He played with the same passion and energy as he had all morning. A little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, had been watching him play while her mom ordered coffee from the cafe. She kept staring at Alex with wide, curious eyes. When Alex started playing a gentle children's song that his grandfather had taught him, the little girl clapped her hands and started dancing right there on the sidewalk. Her mom came out with her coffee and saw her daughter dancing. Instead of hurrying her along, she stood and watched, laughing at her daughter's joy. When the song ended, the little girl ran up to Alex. "That was beautiful," she said in her tiny voice. "Can you play it again?" Alex looked at the mom, who nodded with a smile. "Of course," he said to the little girl. "This one's just for you." As Alex played the song again, he thought about why he loved doing this so much. It wasn't just about the money, although that certainly helped his family. It was about the connections he made, the smiles he brought to people's faces, and the way music could make a regular sidewalk feel like a magical place. The afternoon sun was getting warmer, and Alex decided he would play a few more songs before packing up. He had made enough money for the day, and he wanted to get home to help his mom with groceries. But first he wanted to play his grandfather's favorite song, the one that had started his love for music all those years ago. As he began the familiar melody, Alex felt that same feeling he always got when he played this particular song. It was like his grandfather was right there with him, encouraging him to keep going, to keep sharing his gift with the world. The guitar felt warm in his hands, and for a moment everything else faded away. It was just Alex, his music, and the people who had stopped to listen to a young musician following his dreams on a busy sidewalk. Alex was in the middle of his grandfather's favorite song when he noticed the lunch crowd starting to thin out. The afternoon sun was getting stronger, and he could feel small beads of sweat forming on his forehead. His fingers were getting a bit tired, but he wanted to finish this particular song. It always brought him peace, and today had been such a good day that he wanted to end on this special note. As he played, Alex watched people walking by. There was something calming about observing the rhythm of city life while creating his own rhythm with the guitar. Office workers hurrying back from lunch, mothers pushing strollers, elderly couples taking slow walks, students heading to afternoon classes. Everyone had their own story, their own destination, and for just a few moments his music became part of their day. About half a block away, Tony was having the worst day he'd had in weeks. His motorcycle had broken down that morning, forcing him to take the bus to work. Then his boss had given him extra paperwork that made him late for lunch. Now he was rushing to meet his friends at their usual hangout spot, already 30 minutes behind schedule. Tony wasn't a bad person, but he had a habit of getting frustrated when things didn't go his way. Today, everything seemed to be going wrong. His phone kept buzzing with messages from his friends asking where he was, and he was trying to text back while walking fast down the crowded sidewalk. He was wearing his leather jacket, the one that made him feel confident and tough. Tony worked at a car repair shop, and after work he and his friends would often ride their motorcycles around the city. It was their way of unwinding and feeling free. But today, without his bike and running late, Tony felt irritated and out of sorts. As Tony got closer to where Alex was playing, he was completely absorbed in his phone. One of his friends had just sent a funny video, and Tony was watching it while walking. He barely looked up, trusting his feet to carry him forward while his eyes stayed glued to the small screen. Alex noticed someone approaching but didn't think much of it. People walked by constantly, and he had learned to focus on his music while staying aware of his surroundings. He was just reaching the most beautiful part of his grandfather's song, the part where the melody seemed to dance in the air. The first sign of trouble was when Tony's heavy work boot caught the corner of Alex's guitar case. Tony was moving fast, and his foot hit the case with enough force to send it sliding across the sidewalk. The coins and bills that Alex had earned throughout the day scattered in all directions. Alex looked up in surprise, his fingers stopping mid-song. For a split second, everything seemed to move in slow motion. Tony, realizing something had happened, looked up from his phone. His forward momentum was carrying him directly toward Alex and his guitar. Tony tried to stop, but he was moving too fast. His shoulder bumped into Alex, who was sitting on his small folding stool. Alex instinctively tried to protect his guitar, pulling it closer to his chest, but the collision was unavoidable. Tony's body weight and speed created a domino effect. Alex was knocked sideways off his stool, and as he fell, he lost his grip on the guitar. The beautiful acoustic guitar that had belonged to his grandfather, the instrument that meant everything to him, flew through the air. Time seemed to freeze as the guitar spun end over end. Alex watched helplessly from the ground as his most precious possession sailed toward the brick wall of the building behind him. He wanted to scream, to somehow stop what was happening, but it was too late. The sound of the guitar hitting the wall was unlike anything Alex had ever heard. It wasn't just the crash of wood against brick. It was the sound of dreams breaking, of memories shattering, of his connection to his grandfather being severed in one terrible moment. The guitar hit the wall with tremendous force. The neck snapped completely, hanging by just the strings. The body of the guitar cracked down the middle, and pieces of wood scattered across the sidewalk. The sound hole, which had produced such beautiful music just moments before, was now just a gaping wound in broken wood. Alex sat on the sidewalk where he had fallen, staring at the destruction. He couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe properly. The guitar that had been perfect and whole just seconds ago was now completely destroyed, beyond repair, gone forever. The few people who had been nearby stopped and stared. Mrs. Rodriguez from the flower shop gasped and covered her mouth with her hands. A businessman who had been walking by pulled out his phone, not sure if he should call for help or just keep walking. Tony stood there, also in shock. His phone was still in his hand, the video still playing, but he wasn't looking at it anymore. He was looking at the broken guitar, at Alex sitting on the ground, at the scattered money, and trying to understand what had just happened. "Oh, man," Tony said, his voice shaky. I didn't see you there." Alex finally found his voice, but it came out as barely a whisper. "My guitar." He looked at Tony, then back at the broken pieces. "My grandfather's guitar." Tony felt a knot forming in his stomach. He hadn't meant for this to happen. He had just been rushing, trying to get to his friends, not paying attention. But looking at the young musician on the ground and the destroyed instrument, Tony knew that his intentions didn't matter now. "Look, kid," Tony said, his tone becoming defensive. He was feeling guilty and embarrassed, and when Tony felt uncomfortable, he tended to get aggressive. "You shouldn't be sitting right in the middle of the sidewalk. People need to walk here." Alex looked up at Tony in disbelief. "I've been playing here every weekend for months. Everyone knows I play here." "Well, I didn't know," Tony shot back. "You should watch where you put your stuff. This is a public sidewalk, not your personal concert hall." The words hit Alex like another physical blow. Not only was his guitar destroyed, but the person who destroyed it was acting like it was Alex's fault. Alex felt tears starting to form in his eyes, and he quickly looked down. He didn't want this angry stranger to see him cry. Mrs. Rodriguez approached cautiously. "Excuse me," she said to Tony, "but this young man plays here every weekend. He's never bothered anyone. What happened was an accident, but maybe I could what?" Tony interrupted, his voice getting louder. "Buy him a new guitar? I don't have that kind of money. Besides, if he's going to play on the street, he should expect things like this to happen." Tony immediately regretted saying that. Even as the words came out of his mouth, he knew they were wrong. But he was embarrassed and frustrated, and instead of taking responsibility, he was making everything worse. Alex slowly got to his feet and walked over to the broken guitar. He knelt down and gently picked up the largest piece, the body with the broken sound hole. He held it carefully, as if it might somehow come back to life in his hands. "This was my grandfather's," Alex said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. "He taught me how to play on this guitar. It's all I had left of him." For a moment, Tony's defensive anger wavered. There was something in the boy's voice that made Tony realize this wasn't just about a broken instrument. This was about something much deeper, much more important. But before Tony could say anything, his phone buzzed again. His friends were getting impatient, wondering where he was. Tony looked at his phone, then at Alex holding the broken guitar, then back at his phone. "I've got to go," Tony said, already starting to walk away. "I'm sorry about your guitar, but accidents happen. Maybe you should find a safer place to play." And with that, Tony hurried away, leaving Alex alone with the pieces of his broken dreams scattered across the sidewalk. John had been sitting at the corner table of Sunrise Cafe for almost an hour, enjoying one of the few quiet moments he'd had all week. He was in town for a charity event at the Children's Hospital, something that was very close to his heart. The event wasn't until evening, but he had arrived early to visit some of the kids privately, away from cameras and crowds. After spending the morning at the hospital, John needed some time to decompress. Meeting sick children always affected him deeply, Their strength and positive attitudes in the face of serious illnesses reminded him why he did the charity work in the first place. But it was also emotionally draining, and he had learned over the years that he needed these quiet moments to recharge. Sunrise Cafe had become his go-to spot when he was in this city. It was small and cozy, not the kind of place where people expected to see someone famous. The owner, Mrs. Chen, treated him like any other customer, which he appreciated more than she probably knew. Today he was wearing a simple baseball cap and casual clothes, hoping to blend in with the lunch crowd. John had noticed the young musician when he first sat down. The kid couldn't have been more than 16 or 17, but he played with a maturity that impressed John. There was something special about watching someone so young pour their heart into their music. It reminded John of his own journey, how he had started from humble beginnings and worked his way up through determination and never giving up. Throughout the morning, John had watched people stop to listen to the boy's music. He saw how the kid interacted with his audience, always polite and grateful, never pushy or demanding. When that little girl had started dancing to his music, John had smiled behind his coffee cup. These were the moments that made life beautiful, he thought. John had been planning to drop some money in the guitar case before he left. He always tried to support street performers when he could. They were following their dreams, working hard, and bringing joy to people's lives. That deserved respect and support. He had also been thinking about his own upcoming charity event. Maybe this young musician would be interested in performing. John was always looking for local talent to include in his events. It made them more personal and gave unknown artists a chance to shine. But John's peaceful afternoon was shattered when he saw the collision happen right in front of him. He had been watching as the man in the leather jacket approached, walking fast and staring at his phone. John recognized the signs immediately. He had seen it countless times. People so absorbed in their devices that they were completely unaware of their surroundings. John had a feeling something was about to go wrong. When the man's foot hit the guitar case, John started to stand up, instinctively wanting to help. But everything happened so fast that even John, with his quick reflexes, couldn't prevent what came next. John watched in horror as the collision unfolded. He saw the young musician try to protect his guitar, saw the instrument fly through the air, heard the sickening sound of wood hitting brick. The destruction was complete and devastating. But what happened next made John even angrier than the accident itself. John had seen plenty of accidents in his life. People made mistakes, things happened, and usually, decent people took responsibility for their actions. They apologized. They tried to make things right. They showed compassion for those they had hurt. This man in the leather jacket did none of those things. John listened in disbelief as the man blamed the young musician for the accident. He heard the defensive, aggressive tone, the refusal to take any responsibility. He saw the kid sitting on the ground, holding pieces of his broken guitar. While this grown man acted like the victim, when Mrs. Rodriguez tried to intervene and the man dismissed her rudely, John had heard enough. He stood up from his table, his chair scraping against the floor. At 6'1" and weighing over 250 pounds, John was an imposing figure even in casual clothes. John walked out of the cafe and onto the sidewalk, his jaw set and his eyes focused on the man who was now starting to walk away from the scene he had created. "Excuse me," John said, his voice carrying clearly across the sidewalk. It wasn't loud, but there was something in his tone that made everyone in the area stop what they were doing and look. Tony had only taken a few steps when he heard the voice behind him. Something about the tone made him stop and turn around. When he saw John approaching, Tony's first thought was that this was just another person who wanted to get involved in something that wasn't their business. "Yeah, what?" Tony said, still defensive and irritated. John walked closer, and as he did, Mrs. Rodriguez gasped softly. She recognized him now, though she wasn't sure if she should say anything. A few other people on the sidewalk were starting to stare, some pulling out their phones. "I think we need to talk about what just happened here," John said calmly, stopping a few feet away from Tony. Tony looked John up and down, taking in his size and build. Even without knowing who John was, Tony could tell this wasn't someone to mess with. But Tony's pride and embarrassment made him double down on his attitude. "Look, man, I don't know who you think you are, but this is none of your business," Tony said. "It was an accident. These things happen." John nodded slowly. "You're right. Accidents do happen. I saw the whole thing from inside the cafe. You were walking fast, looking at your phone, not paying attention to where you were going. That part was an accident. Tony felt a little relief. At least this guy understood it wasn't intentional. But, John continued, his voice getting slightly firmer, what happened after the accident, that wasn't an accident. That was a choice. What are you talking about? Tony asked, though something in John's steady gaze was making him uncomfortable. I'm talking about how you handled the situation after you destroyed that young man's guitar. I'm talking about how you blamed him for your mistake. I'm talking about how you walked away without taking any responsibility for what you did. Behind them, Alex was still kneeling on the sidewalk, holding pieces of his grandfather's guitar. He was listening to this conversation but couldn't quite believe what was happening. This stranger was standing up for him, something that rarely happened in Alex's experience. Look, I said I was sorry. Tony lied, knowing full well that he hadn't apologized at all. John shook his head. No, you didn't. I heard every word you said. You told him he shouldn't be playing on the sidewalk. You told him to watch where he puts his stuff. You told him he should expect things like this to happen. You blamed him for getting in your way, but you never said you were sorry. Tony's face was getting red now. He wasn't used to being called out like this, especially not in front of other people. Who are you to lecture me? You don't know anything about me or my situation. You're right, I don't know your situation, John said, but I know what I saw. I saw a young man sitting peacefully, sharing his music with people, earning a few honest dollars. And I saw you destroy something precious and then act like it was his fault. More people were gathering now, sensing that something important was happening. Some recognized John and were whispering to each other, but most were just drawn by the intensity of the conversation. John looked over at Alex, who was still holding the broken guitar. That wasn't just any guitar, was it? John called out gently. Alex looked up, tears still visible in his eyes. It was my grandfather's, he said quietly. He taught me how to play on it. It's all I had left of him. John turned back to Tony, and now his expression was harder than before. Did you hear that? You didn't just break a guitar. You destroyed this kid's connection to his grandfather. You destroyed something irreplaceable. Tony felt the weight of all the eyes on him. He was starting to realize that this situation was bigger than he had thought. And this man confronting him wasn't going to just walk away like everyone else usually did. Look, I feel bad about the guitar, okay? Tony said, his voice getting defensive again. But I can't fix it now. What's done is done. I've got places to be. John stepped closer, and now Tony could see the determination in his eyes. What's done is done. That's your solution? That's how you handle your mistakes? I don't have money for a new guitar, Tony said, which was partially true but mostly an excuse. This isn't just about money, John said. This is about doing the right thing. This is about taking responsibility for your actions. This is about treating people with respect and dignity. Tony looked around at all the people watching, feeling trapped and embarrassed. He didn't know who this man was, but clearly everyone else seemed to think he was important. Tony was starting to wish he had just apologized and moved on when he had the chance. Fine, Tony said, his voice getting louder. What do you want me to do? I said it was an accident. I can't turn back time. John smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who was about to teach an important lesson. Actually, John said, I think you can do exactly that. I think you can make this right. And I'm going to make sure you do. Tony stared at John, trying to figure out what this stranger meant by making him make this right. The crowd around them was getting bigger, and Tony could feel everyone's eyes on him. Some people had their phones out recording what was happening. This was the last thing Tony needed today. Look, I don't know who you think you are, Tony said, his voice shaky now. But you can't force me to do anything. John nodded calmly. You're absolutely right. I can't force you to do anything. But I can ask you some questions, and maybe you can force yourself to think about the answers. Tony didn't respond, but he didn't walk away either. Something about John's presence made it impossible to just leave. Let me ask you something, John continued. How old are you? 28, Tony answered, not sure why he was responding. 28. So you're an adult, right? You've got a job, responsibilities, people who depend on you? Yeah, so what? And when you make mistakes at work, what happens? Do you blame your coworkers? Do you tell your boss it's not your fault when something goes wrong? Tony shifted uncomfortably. That's different, is it? How is it different? Tony couldn't answer that question because the truth was it wasn't different at all. At the auto shop where he worked, if Tony made a mistake and damaged someone's car, he would have to fix it or pay for it. His boss wouldn't accept excuses or blame shifting. John looked over at Alex, who was still sitting on the sidewalk with the broken guitar pieces. "Can you tell us a little more about that guitar?" John asked gently. Alex looked up, surprised to be included in the conversation. "My grandfather gave it to me when I was 8 years old. He said music was the most important thing in life because it connects people's hearts." John smiled at that. "He sounds like a wise man." "He was," Alex said, his voice getting emotional. "When he got sick, he couldn't teach me anymore, but he would still listen to me play every day. The last song I played for him was on this guitar, right before he passed away 2 years ago." The crowd that had gathered went completely silent. Even Tony felt something twist in his stomach as he listened. "After he died," Alex continued, "my mom wanted to sell the guitar because we needed money, but I begged her not to. I promised I would use it to help our family, to earn money by playing on the street. She finally agreed because she knew how much it meant to me." John turned back to Tony. "So this wasn't just a guitar. This was a family heirloom, a source of income, and a connection to someone this young man loved very much. Does that change how you feel about what happened?" Tony looked at Alex, really looked at him for the first time. The kid was young, maybe the same age Tony had been when his own father died. Tony remembered how hard that had been, how angry and lost he had felt. He also noticed Alex's worn-out clothes, the old sneakers, the careful way he was handling even the broken pieces of the guitar. I didn't know," Tony said quietly. "Of course you didn't know," John replied. "You were too busy looking at your phone to notice anything about the person you ran into. But here's the thing, Tony, is it?" Tony nodded, surprised that John knew his name. Someone in the crowd must have recognized him. "Here's the thing, Tony. You didn't need to know Alex's story to treat him with respect. You didn't need to know about his grandfather to take responsibility for your actions. Basic human decency doesn't require a sad backstory." Those words hit Tony harder than any punch could have. John was right, and Tony knew it. He had been raised better than this. His own mother had taught him to always own up to his mistakes and help people when he could. "When I was your age," John continued, "I made plenty of mistakes. The difference is I had people in my life who taught me that how you handle your mistakes is what defines your character. Not the mistakes themselves, but what you do after you make them." Tony thought about his mother, who had worked double shifts to raise him and his sister after their father died. She had always told him that being a man meant taking responsibility for his actions, even when it was hard. "I've been having a terrible day," Tony said, his defensive anger finally starting to crack. "Everything's been going wrong and I was rushing to meet my friends and you took your bad day out on someone who had nothing to do with it," John finished. "I get it. We've all been there. But that doesn't make it right." Alex stood up slowly, still holding pieces of his guitar. "I play here every weekend to help my mom pay rent. She works 2 jobs, but it's still not enough. The money I make here, it's not much, but it helps buy groceries and pay for my school supplies." Tony felt like someone had punched him in the gut. Here he was, complaining about his bad day, while this kid was working every weekend just to help his family survive. "I've been saving up to try to get into music school," Alex continued. "My music teacher says I have talent, but we can't afford the tuition. I was hoping that maybe if I kept playing and saving, I could earn enough for at least the first semester." "How much had you saved?" John asked. "About $400, Alex said. "It's not much, but it was a start." Tony reached into his pocket and felt his wallet. He had just gotten paid yesterday, and he was planning to spend most of it hanging out with his friends this weekend. Suddenly, that seemed really unimportant. "The guitar wasn't worth much money," Alex said, "but it was all I had of my grandfather, and now—" Alex's voice broke and he couldn't finish the sentence. He knelt back down and carefully placed the broken pieces back in his guitar case, as if he was putting his grandfather to rest. John watched this and felt his own emotions rising. He had lost his own father when he was young, and he understood the importance of those physical connections to people we love. "Tony," John said, his voice gentler now, "I want you to really think about something. If this was your little sister, or your girlfriend, or your mother sitting here with their most precious possession destroyed, how would you want the person responsible to handle it?" Tony closed his eyes and imagined his sister in Alex's place. His sister, who was studying to be a teacher and worked at a coffee shop to pay for college, his sister who still had their father's watch and wore it every day. If someone broke that watch and then told her it was her fault? Tony opened his eyes and looked at Alex again. The kid was crying now, trying to hide it but not succeeding. Tony felt ashamed of himself in a way he hadn't felt since he was a child. "I'm sorry," Tony said, and this time he meant it. "I'm really, really sorry." Alex looked up, surprised by the change in Tony's voice. "I was being a jerk," Tony continued. "I was having a bad day and I took it out on you, and that was wrong. You didn't deserve that. Your grandfather didn't deserve that." The crowd was still watching, but Tony didn't care anymore. This wasn't about them. "I don't have enough money to buy you a guitar as nice as your grandfather's was," Tony said, "but I want to try to make this right. Will you let me try?" John smiled for the first time since this whole thing started. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say." Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been watching everything, wiped tears from her eyes. Other people in the crowd nodded approvingly. Even some of the teenagers who had been recording on their phones put them away, sensing that they were witnessing something genuine and important. "There's a music store 3 blocks from here," John said. "What do you say we all take a walk over there and see what we can do?" Tony nodded, feeling nervous but determined. Yes, let's do that." Alex looked back and forth between Tony and John, not quite believing what was happening. After such a terrible moment, these 2 strangers were trying to help him. Maybe his grandfather was right about music connecting people's hearts. Maybe there was more good in the world than he had thought. "Okay," Alex said quietly. "Let's go." The walk to the music store was unlike anything Alex had ever experienced. Just 30 minutes ago, he had been sitting on the sidewalk holding pieces of his broken guitar, feeling like his world had ended. Now he was walking down the street with 2 strangers who seemed genuinely determined to help him. Tony walked beside Alex, carrying the guitar case with the broken pieces inside. He had insisted on carrying it, saying it was the least he could do. John walked on Alex's other side, and although Alex still didn't know exactly who this man was, he could tell that other people on the street recognized him. Some waved, others took pictures from a distance, but John just smiled and waved back without making a big deal of it. "So Alex," John said as they walked, "tell me more about your music. How long have you been playing?" "About 8 years," Alex replied. "My grandfather started teaching me when I was 8. He said I had natural talent, but he also made me practice every single day." "Smart man," John said. "Talent without hard work doesn't get you very far. But hard work without talent only gets you so far too. Sounds like you've got both." Tony listened as Alex talked about his music, his family, and his dreams. The more he learned about this kid, the worse Tony felt about how he had acted earlier. But instead of making him want to run away, it made him more determined to fix things properly. "What kind of music do you like to play?" Tony asked. Alex seemed surprised that Tony was asking. "All kinds, really. Classical stuff that my grandfather taught me. Some modern songs that people like to hear, and I've been trying to write my own songs too." "You write your own music?" John asked, clearly impressed. "I try to. They're not very good yet, but my music teacher says I'm getting better." "I'd love to hear one sometime," John said. When they reached Harmony Music Store, Alex stopped walking. He had passed by this store many times, always pressing his face against the window to look at the beautiful guitars inside, but he had never been able to afford to go in. "I've never actually been inside," Alex admitted. "Well, today's a good day to change that," John said, holding the door open. The store was amazing. Guitars of every size, color, and style hung on the walls and sat on stands throughout the room. There were electric guitars, acoustic guitars, classical guitars, and some instruments Alex didn't even recognize. The smell of wood polish and new strings filled the air. A man in his 50s with graying hair approached them. He was wearing a Harmony Music Store t-shirt and had the friendly but cautious expression of someone who dealt with all kinds of customers. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," he said. "I'm Mike, the owner. How can I help you today?" John gestured toward Alex. "This young man needs a new guitar. His previous one was accidentally destroyed, and we're here to find him a replacement." Mike looked at Alex with sympathy. "Oh no, what happened?" Alex started to explain, but Tony stepped forward. "It was my fault," Tony said. "I wasn't paying attention and I crashed into him. His guitar got broken and it was his grandfather's guitar." Mike's expression softened even more. "I'm sorry to hear that. Losing an instrument with sentimental value is always heartbreaking. We were hoping you could help us find something suitable. John said. Mike nodded and led them over to a section of acoustic guitars. What's your price range? Tony reached for his wallet but stopped when he saw the price tags. Even the cheapest guitars were more expensive than he had expected. He had about $300 with him, but most of the decent guitars were $400 or more. I have $300, Tony said honestly.
I know it's not much, but it's what I can do right now. Mike looked thoughtful.
Let me show you what we have in that range. He pointed to several guitars, explaining the differences between them. They were all nice instruments, much better than Tony had expected for the price, but Alex seemed hesitant to touch any of them. Go ahead, John encouraged. Try a few and see how they feel. Alex carefully picked up a medium-sized acoustic guitar with a warm brown finish. He sat down on a nearby stool and tuned it quickly, his fingers moving with practiced ease. Then he began to play. The music that came from the guitar was beautiful, but even more impressive was watching Alex play. His whole body seemed to relax and his face lit up with joy. This was clearly where he belonged, what he was meant to do. That's beautiful, Mike said when Alex finished the song. You've got real talent. Thank you, Alex said, but then he carefully put the guitar back on its stand. It's a great guitar, but I don't want anyone to spend that much money on me. Tony frowned. What do you mean? I broke your guitar, so I should replace it. But this costs $450, Alex said. That's more than you said you had. And it's way more than my grandfather's guitar was worth. John had been watching this exchange with growing respect for Alex. Here was a kid who had every right to be angry and demanding, but instead he was worried about other people spending too much money on him. Alex, John said, can I ask you something? Sure. If you had the money, if cost wasn't an issue, which guitar in this store would you choose? Alex looked around the store, his eyes eventually settling on a beautiful guitar displayed in a case behind the counter. It had a rich, deep color and intricate detailing around the sound hole. That one, Alex said quietly. But I couldn't even dream of affording something like that. Mike followed his gaze and smiled. Ah, you have excellent taste. That's a Taylor 814C. It's one of our finest guitars. How much? John asked. $2,800, Mike replied. Tony's eyes widened. That was almost 10 times what he had planned to spend. John walked over to look at the guitar more closely. Can you tell us about it? Mike's eyes lit up as he began describing the guitar's features, its sound quality, the craftsmanship that went into making it. It's really a professional-level instrument, he concluded. John nodded thoughtfully. Then he turned to Alex. Play something on that $450 guitar again. Something you wrote yourself this time. Alex looked confused but picked up the guitar again. He played one of his original songs, a gentle melody that told the story of missing someone you love. The lyrics were simple but heartfelt, and his voice carried emotion that made everyone in the store stop what they were doing to listen. When he finished, there was complete silence for a moment. That was incredible, Mike said. Did you really write that? Alex nodded shyly. John pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Hey, it's me. I need a favor. Yes, I'm still planning to be there tonight. Actually, I want to add someone to the lineup. A young local musician. Trust me on this one. He hung up and turned to the group. Alex, how would you feel about performing at a charity event tonight? What kind of charity event? Alex asked. It's for the Children's Hospital. We're raising money for new equipment and programs. There will be about 500 people there, including some music industry people. Alex's mouth fell open. You want me to perform in front of 500 people? Only if you want to, John said. But I think people need to hear your music. And I think you're ready for a bigger audience. Tony was watching this conversation with amazement. First, this stranger had stood up for Alex. Now he was offering him a chance to perform at a major event? Who are you? Tony asked. John smiled and pulled off his baseball cap. I'm John Cena. The silence in the music store was deafening. Mike dropped the guitar pick he had been holding. Tony's mouth fell open. Alex just stared. You're John Cena? Alex whispered. Guilty as charged, John said with a grin. The John Cena? We champion John Cena? Well, I've had that title a few times, yes. Alex looked like he might faint. And you want me to perform at your charity event? I want you to perform at our charity event, John corrected. This isn't about me. This is about giving you a platform to share your incredible talent. John turned to Mike. Now, about that guitar Alex was looking at. Oh no, Alex said quickly. I can't let you buy me a $2,800 guitar. That's way too much. Alex, John said gently. Let me tell you something I've learned. When someone has a gift like yours, when they have the potential to bring joy and inspiration to thousands of people, investing in that gift isn't just helping them. It's helping everyone whose lives they'll touch with their music. John pulled out his credit card. Besides, I've been looking for the right person to sponsor. Someone who represents what music and hard work can accomplish. I think I just found him. Tony watched in amazement as John purchased the expensive guitar. But more than that, he watched Alex's face as he realized that his life was about to change completely. I can't believe this is happening, Alex said. Believe it, John said. But remember, this is just the beginning. The guitar is just a tool. Your talent, your heart, your dedication, that's what will really make the difference. As they prepared to leave the music store, Tony felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt proud to have been part of something good, something that would change someone's life for the better. John, Tony said, thank you, not just for helping Alex, but for showing me how to handle this the right way. Thank you for being willing to learn, John replied. That says a lot about your character. That evening, Alex performed at John's charity event with his new guitar. His music brought the audience to their feet, and by the end of the night,